Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first online academic seminar of the Spring 2022 semester. Thank you all for your interest and participation in the seminar. Today, we are hosting Dr. Aras Bozkurt from Anadolu University. The title of his talk is "A Butterfly Flaps Its Wings in the New Normal, COVID-19 Pandemic and Online Distance Education." There will be a Q&A part after his talk, and the floor is yours, Dr. Bozkurt.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Hello, everyone. I am Aras Bozkurt, an Associate Professor of Distance Education at Anadolu University. I am really happy to be with you and share some of my thoughts on COVID-19 teaching, learning, and education. Let me briefly introduce myself. On the right side, you will see my faculty and editorial roles, but the things that defines me are presented on the left side. I am a nomad wandering to seek knowledge, and I am a lazy learner who learns for meaning making. Actually, sometimes I feel like I am the Alice in the Wonderland who is chasing the white rabbit to find the truth. And while I was chasing the white rabbit, I wrote a couple of articles. You can see the list of these publications, and the following slides will actually provide some major emerging themes identified in these publications and reflections drawn from these articles. These are the cover pages or the aforementioned articles. What I am trying to present is a meta perspective and synthesis of a series of publications on the COVID-19 pandemic and education. Okay, let's explore the COVID-19 pandemic together. What Jim Wallace says perfectly illustrates what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. He says, sometimes it takes a natural disaster to reveal a social disaster. In our case, a butterfly flapping its wings was enough to reveal the global social disaster. What happens when a butterfly flaps its wings? At the end of the day, the lesson learned was so simple. With online, offline, and on-site connections, the world is a global village, and a butterfly flapping its wings in Asia can cause a hurricane all around the world. Currently, it seems that the global education system in the middle of this hurricane. The COVID butterfly flapped its wings, and a compulsory shift in our paradigms has occurred. The COVID-19 pandemic was unexpected, unpredicted, and hit the entire globe. And it hit really hard. Nations which were once in a race for prosperity suddenly entered a race for survival, which indicates that we need to reset what we know, learn unlearning, and reset and consequences. Today, we are living in a strange new world where to be social means to keep distance, and weirdly, to be labeled positive has negative connotations. These developments suggest that we are on the brink of a new future where time would be understood in terms of BC and AC to indicate before and after COVID-19. In fact, we are going through a global reset of many things, including education. What is new in the normal? The COVID pandemic has been more than a crisis. It has been actually a global wake-up call to change our paradigms and the way we perceive the world. Not surprisingly, the pandemic has altered the way we interpret normal as well as the way we live. The interruption of education and the derivations of normal suggest that we are experiencing an extraordinary time, one marked by major shifts in the way we understand and interpret different areas of life. Accordingly, new implies evolving rather than contrasting or even intending to replace the old. We can argue that after COVID-19 times, we need to focus on the future and avoid the temptation to go back to the normal, as most of the problems reside in the past or in the normal we once knew. In this transition process, our minds can trick and deceive us into going back to the normal by perceiving the past as a comfort zone and the future as a challenge with full of unknowns and uncertainty. However, to see things in this way would be an illusion, considering that there has been a rupture in normal. The previously known normal no longer exists, and the new normal is real and here to stay, and therefore we need to reconstruct our future on solid grounds by accepting the reality of the new normal. In the educational landscape, new normal means revisiting how we define the art of teaching and learning and asking open-ended questions on educational pedagogies, theories, practices, and technologies. When seeking the open-ended responses to these questions, we need to include the participation of all stakeholders in order to reach a broad consensus on these issues. Using the experiences gained during the pandemic, we now need to reimagine, re-engineer, and reconstruct education. What happened when the COVID-19 pandemic became our life, part of our life? Accordingly, as an outcome of measures taken worldwide to slow down the pandemic, more than 1.6 billion enrolled students of all ages from all around the globe experienced interruption of education. This equals nearly 90% of the global student population, and probably this is something we will not experience in the future. I mean, this is an historical moment for many of us. As a result of this interruption, emergency remote education is put into practice. The educational practices during the COVID-19 pandemic are denoted with different terms in different countries. However, these terms do not quite capture what is being practiced during the interruption of education, and these practices can be better described as emergency remote education. The remarkable difference between emergency remote education and distance education is that the latter is an option while the former is an obligation. Such an understanding is crucial because misconceptions in definitions would lead us to misconceptions in practices. We have many educational sins, and I hope the future generations will forgive us. We should pray for the forgiveness. While emergency remote education provided temporal solutions, it also led to educational sins. In pivoting to online emergency remote education, as seen in the failure of copying traditional face-to-face education and pasting it to online education, the same simple mechanism of copying and pasting cannot be applied. Imitating a process meant for something else resulted in unsuccessful and ineffective learning experiences. To heal this situation, the benefits and positive features of distance education need to be explained, advocated, and promoted. In short, distance learning's blind imitation of face-to-face instruction has been the chief educational sin, one which will have both short-term and long-term consequences in the post-COVID world. And I think we already started to witness these consequences. we should also revisit the understanding of the global village. The COVID-19 pandemic has generated a great degree of uncertainty regarding the future of globalization, especially as it relates to education. Deglobalization measures were already on the rise when COVID-19 struck, but these measures reached their peak in the responses of many countries to close their borders to slow down the spread of the pandemic. The global village has been transformed into a global online village, where online infrastructures, communications, and interactions have a significant role. New learning ecosystems are a critical topic to explore. Many universities have already adopted digital transformation strategies as a way to be resilient in the digital knowledge age, and this trend has now accelerated on account of the COVID-19 pandemic. As such, digital ecosystems have emerged. In creating a digital presence, a digital twin needs to be birthed. In other words, physical campuses are reproducing digital versions of themselves. However, the great online and online learning ecologies will also bring many future challenges. For instance, how will we regulate these spaces? How will learners form their digital identities? How will we ensure equity and justice? How will we react to events of racial, religious, ethnic, social, and economic discrimination? And how will we ensure and enable efficient, effective, and sustainable teaching and learning processes? In short, in addition to opportunities offered by digital twins in digital ecosystems, there will be many challenges that we must be proactive in addressing and managing. And we are talking about digital ecosystems, and more recently, I see that many people are already lured by the term metaverse. Actually, metaverse is not a new concept. It was already here, but I think we like rebranding the terms we know, and we like reinventing the wheels. Anyway, digital burnout and digital fatigue, we should definitely think about these terms, as most of us experience digital burnout and digital fatigue. Digital fatigue is largely related to our physical or mental performance. More recently, it has been linked to the digital tools and spaces we use during online education. However, the recipe to prevent digital burnout and digital fatigue is relatively simple. Apply the best theories and practices of online distance education and design actual learning processes rather than processes with techno-fetish so-called designs. Surveillance, ethics, and data privacy concerns are critical issues that we should consider on. In a panoptical society, the data that is collected through surveillance is the new oil. Beyond issues of mining digital footprints, violations of privacy, and mass surveillance, the real concern is the imposition of these features of panoptic society, and the panoptic society will lead to our acceptance and normalizations of these terms. It may be certainly easy to accept that the year 2020 was awful, but the year 2021 was better, and 2022 will be a much better and happier year. Yet, as we are still in 2022, we must ask ourselves, are we living in 2022, or are we on the verge of descending into George Orwell's 1984, a time which depicts a dystopian world where mass surveillance was the normal? Divide is an inherent characteristics of humankind, and it was visible in every layers of the society. The digital divide, which refers to gap between those who have and do not have access to computers and the internet, is a term that has evolved over time and emerged in new forms. While the idea of human divide is not limited to digital form, and it never was, currently it is digital divide that has been threatening the entire globe. And while we are already well aware of the cultural, religious, ethnic, and economical, financial divides that separate humanity from an educational perspective, we are now witnessing that the digital divide is far greater than we imagined, and as it is responsible for inequities and injustices, we should focus on these issues. In this sense, it is critical to answer the following questions. How should we respond as a global society? Should we continue to let the gap widen, or should we act now before the gap grows out of control? Openness and open education. Openness is a perspective with deep roots, and these terms should be part of our educational practices. During COVID-19 pandemic, the entire educational landscape has needed educational resources capable of being shared among and within educational networks. In this regard, open educational resources, OERs, and open educational practices, OEPs, have played a significant role in ensuring the sustainability of education during the first waves of the pandemic. However, we also learned that we need to inquire who has ownership of knowledge and why is sharing as a practice important. Let's explore these questions by looking at the life of nomads. Nomads, for instance, do not settle down, but rather wander around to find resources and survive. Such a way of life made sharing as a vital skill. They shared their tools, experiences, stories, and most importantly, they shared their knowledge to collectively survive. And in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been forced to revisit our early traditions, follow our instincts, share and collaborate to survive, just like the nomads had to do. We have instinctively and sometimes unwittingly and unintentionally shared in order to survive in these tough and wild times. We also witnessed emerging educational roles of the parents and schools. The crisis also taught us the emerging roles of the parents and the invisible roles of the schools and universities. In the absence of teachers and schools during emergency remote education, many parents took to educational roles to supervise or support the students, and most importantly, to ensure the continuity of the education. Many country cases reported that schools and universities, in fact, were sheltering many students, and these buildings were places where a considerable number of students were getting their basic needs like reaching proper food or for socializing. I mean, these are basic things, and these places were the only resources they could get. Trauma, psychological pressure, and anxiety are the topics we ignore, but they should be our focus in the educational landscape. In these traumatic times, psychological pressure and anxiety were prevalent among students, teachers, and also among families. Among many, the uncertainty and fear were the main reasons. Whether in K-12 or in higher education, Pedagogy of care is needed in these traumatic times because care is one of the basic needs when we navigate on unknown territories, experience new approaches, and stick to our lives during the lockdown days. Pedagogy of care and trauma-informed pedagogy, critical issues for COVID times and also for the post-COVID world. Given the effects of traumatic events can have on learners' well-being, we must be sure to create a warm climate and a welcoming space where we can listen, understand, respect, help, and love them. Trauma-informed care and empathy-oriented pandemic pedagogy should focus on achieving effective and emotional outcomes rather than pedagogical outcomes. We should also pay attention human-centered pandemic pedagogy. Pandemic pedagogy provides the opportunity to apply asymmetric designs such as teaching and learning as an emergent practice based on the needs of the learner and to pursue a pedagogical minimalism, such as meaningful teaching and learning for the sole purpose of teaching and learning and nothing else. In pedagogical minimalism, the core idea is putting humans and their learning needs to the center of all educational processes. A human-centered pedagogy acknowledges learners as selves and focuses more on liberating their souls and minds of learners so that they can change and transform the world. On these grounds, we can argue that the pandemic can be a collective awakening to promote agency and social change through human-centered pandemic pedagogy. Support committees and mechanisms are issues worth talking about. During the first waves of pandemic, collaboration and sharing among the individuals and institutions were the first reflex in many countries, and these countries were able to soften the first wave of the COVID-19 crisis. Support committees and mechanisms were effective, and their scope included emotional and pedagogical support. And while we are forming this type of committees, we use social media effectively. Inequality and social justice is another theme to highlight. The inequalities were not new, but they were now clearly visible through the lens of the COVID-19. In fact, what the pandemic is doing is augmenting of deeply rooted pre-existing inequalities. The COVID-19 pandemic has uncovered many facts that have been ignored for a long while. As we started wearing masks, the real future and characteristics of higher education have been unmasked. And we can now see higher education with no clothes. And if the higher education is naked with nothing to cover its faults, we can and we should scream out, the emperor has no clothes. The value of hard and soft technologies and digital competencies are understood during the pandemic. We also learned by experience that the soft skills and digital competencies were necessary for the implementation of emergency remote education. Unless we can use the tools effectively, investing in hard technologies such as computers and internet will not contribute to creating success stories. However, soft technologies such as theories and approaches are equally important, and we need the right mix, a harmony between these technologies. Actually, in K-12 setting, we learned by experience that, I mean, Fatih project, investing heavily hard technologies doesn't lead to success stories. Now, we are entering a time of hybrid and blended modality of education. Following the new normal, there will be a tendency to adopt blended or hybrid modes of education, which comes from the idea of blending the strengths, one type of mode, and neutralizing the weaknesses of others. This means that we will be able to provide more flexibility, openness, and different entry points for those who seek for knowledge. On the other hand, as educators and educational institutions, how well we are prepared for hybrid and blended learning. To conclude, it is high time for higher education to renew, recalibrate, and reposition itself in the educational landscape. But this would require the institutional higher education to regenerate itself and be born again, like the phoenix. It needs to rise from the ashes, but to do this, it must first face the flames. Without facing the flames, there is no salvation. In this context, what should educators do? How can they create an ideal learning ecosystem? Denon offers a good starting point by proposing that our educational understanding should be shaped by the following priorities. People should be first, content should be second, and technology should be third. And when I look to our practices, I see an inverted order. In the end, technology and education are meant to be for people, and such an approach should always be our mantra as educators. We have to center our arguments on the human, not the technology or the content. Similarly, my dear friend Cha reminds us that teaching and learning are primarily about human beings, for human beings, and by human beings. So we don't ignore the most vital element in whole educational landscape. It's element, it's humans. I mean, it's not technology or nothing else. In line with these thoughts, it is also argued that what we teach in these times can have secondary importance. We have to keep in mind that students will remember not the educational content, but how they felt during these hard times. With an empathetic approach, the story will not center on how successfully deliver educational content, but it will be on how learners narrate and remember these times. This talk provided an outlook to pandemic and its educational consequences, and depicted how we survived to keep teaching and learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. But the question is never what we did in COVID-19 pandemic. On the other hand, the question is what we will do for upcoming interruptions, upcoming crises in the educational landscape. Will we learn from our mistakes, or will we repeat our mistakes? I think we should consider on these issues. As a final reminder, I would like to note that in the educational kingdom, context is the king, content is the queen, quality is the crown, and care and empathy are the kingdom itself. This kingdom, this educational kingdom, is built upon and ruled by the founding principles, equity and justice. And it is committed to inclusivity, diversity, and accessibility. The inhabitants of this kingdom are in seek for meaning, knowledge, and wisdom to realize themselves, transform their environments, and make their learning ecology a better place, not only for themselves, but for everyone and for everything. Probably most of you read this book. It's a great book, and by its definition, an alchemist transforms or creates something through a magical process. In his magnum opus work, The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho narrates that when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. Inspired by these words and the way alchemists are defined, it is our hope that educators will take the role of the alchemists and they will develop, refine, purify, and perfect the educational system to achieve a learning ecosystem that works for everyone. As educational alchemists, we should dream a better future. We should fight for it. We should work for it to ensure that education evolves into its true ideal form. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being here and listening to me. And I think we can continue with question and answer session.
Yes, thank you so much, Aras Hocam. Your presentation is very insightful and interesting, and at the same time inspiring for most of the participants, I guess. Now the floor is open to our participants for the Q&A session.
You know, in this type of presentations, generally there is no question, but I see comments. Thank you. And if any participant are hesitant to ask question, they can also use social media or email to direct their question. I guess I did a good presentation. There is no question.
Let's give some time to them. Yeah, okay, Zehra. Yeah.
I have a question. Well, yeah, obviously, I'm working as a teacher too, and I know there are a lot of changes coming through pandemic, and we just pushed into the big system, and we had many changes, both positive and negative things. But I just ask you about pedagogy minimalism. So I might, maybe I didn't understand that part. What are the things coming with pedagogy minimalism through pandemic? I didn't get it that much.
Okay. Actually, now I am writing an editorial for the next issue of the journal that, and it's about digital transformation. And while I was writing this editorial, I see that how we misinterpret the technology. I mean, now it is obvious that even for on-site and online learning, we heavily use technology, right? And I see that all instruction and learning designs are based on the technology we use. On the other hand, a pedagogical minimalism should put the learners, put the human to the center of all learning designs. What I mean, what I intend to explain is that whatever technology we use, our concern and our focus should be humans, not the technology or other popular shiny terms like the metaverse. Today, for instance, I mean, it is funny to me. I've seen something like metaverse school. Actually, the web is a metaverse by itself. I mean, what I mean is actually that, I mean, whatever we do and whatever technologies we have, our focus should be human. I mean, we have to adopt a minimalist design approach.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question, but I cannot put it in words. We have read your article about before coming to this seminar, and I have encountered this phrase so many times, theory and practice within the concept of praxis. This was used too many times, and as I read your article, I try to put it to categorize it. Is this qualitative, or is this mixed method, or design-based? Where do you put your work methodologically? Can you tell a little bit about the methodology of your work? And sorry, your goal, does it include the rationality of design-based research? Because we are learning sciences students, we are here, many learning sciences students are here. We focus on design-based research. When we hear putting theory and practice together, we always focus on making most of the theory. Does your pedagogical minimalism resemble to making most of what exists, the rationality of design-based research? I don't know if you are familiar with design-based research.
Sure.
But I wonder, I would like to hear about the methodology of your work.
Okay, I hope I captured what you mean.
Aras hocam, our learning sciences doctoral students read the article Teaching in the Age of COVID-19, a longitudinal study, that one.
Okay.
And the question comes from that.
That one, all right. It was actually a synthesis, a meta study of two earlier studies, and we analyzed the findings using data mining and analytic approaches. More specifically, we used text mining and social network analysis. On the other hand, the other co-authors were already leading authors of the previous publications, so it was easy to combine all the findings. And additionally, now probably you see the publications that I used to identify the themes presented in this webinar. You know, some of the publications are editorial. I mean, they are critical opinion papers, I mean, written in that sense. And there is one article, a global, my screen is too small, I cannot see the name, but it is an article with 126 pages. We have written it with 40 scholars from across the globe. It is a good example of the case study, and it is trying to reflect what we experience and what we can do during the pandemic times. I am also familiar, okay, I expand your question. I am also familiar with design-based research, and if you are working in the field of education and especially in educational technology, I think we should benefit from design-based research, because the gap in the field is the missing bond between theory and practice. And I believe that if we employ design-based research, we can use the theoretical accommodation and experience and reflect them to emerging design. So it's important. And another generic comment, actually, I am not a methodologically selective person. I always tell to my friends, I just want to learn something, and when I write an article, I find the research question, and when I identify my research question, it already gives me a walkthrough and identifies my methodological approach that I should adopt. Duygu Hocam, I'm not sure if it was clear enough, but I tried to explain.
Yeah, I think Özge commented on it on the chat, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your response, Aras Hocam. Elif?
I have a question regarding your opinion. I think it's a beautiful idea to put people first when it comes to education, not technology as well. However, as you said, I've been observing a lot of educators tend to put more emphasis on technology rather than the people. And what do you think is stopping us from doing that? I mean, what do you think the underlying reasons are? I was just curious about your opinion on that.
Sorry, I couldn't understand. Can you repeat again?
Yeah, yes, of course. I don't know if my voice is clear now.
No, I have a second screen, so the sound is not clear. It's not.
Okay, I'm sorry. So as you said in the presentation, I think it's a beautiful idea to put people first, not technology, when it comes to education. But I've been observing a lot of educators tend to put more emphasis on technology rather than the people. And I was just curious about like what do you think about the underlying reasons, and what do you think is stopping us from doing that?
Yeah, good question. Do you know the story of the, I hope I pronounced right, sirens? I mean, there were kind of mermaids, they were singing and they were attracting the sailors. And the sailors who are attracted by the sirens were drowning in the rocky oceans. And educational technology is like that. We educators are being lured and tempted by the innovative effect of the new technologies. And actually, I do a lot of systematic reviews, and I see that we never learn from our mistakes. If there is something new, if there is something innovative, we always believe that it is the salvation descending from the sky, and this technology here to heal our educational system, to save us, but it's not. In a meeting in Ministry of Education during the first time of the pandemic, there was a large group of scholars, and people were telling that we should use artificial intelligence, we should use smart boards, and I mean they were putting some arguments to design effective distance education processes. And at the central their arguments, there was technologies like blockchain. Actually, I know blockchain. I mean, it's helpful, but it is not what they are saying. Most of the educators now using these kind of terms to promote their ideas and for marketing purposes. And in that meeting, I told that, okay, actually, my expertise is online distance education and distance education. I told them, as a technology, what I need is a paper and a pen to to design an effective distance education process, I think our interpretation, the way we see technology is also different. Let's say this is a technology, the methods we use technology. If you heard the terms like blended learning or flipped classroom, these are the parts of technology, but they are soft technologies. I mean, technology shouldn't be only the tangible tools. I mean, hard technology doesn't quite reflect the nature of the technology. The way we see the technology is wrong. And as I told you, we like being lured, being trapped by the innovative, cool, smart, shiny technologies. And as humans, I think we don't like learning from our mistakes, and we like repeating the history many times. That's the problem. That's the natural human being.
Thanks a lot. I get what you mean.
I just, as an additional comment, in coming years, we will hear many new technologies, and you will see that the trend and pattern will never change. Most of the people, most of the folks will follow these terms, will consume it, and then they will discover a new term. But that's quite normal. I mean, some people should be lured, and some people should approach critically to find solution. And to find solution, we should see these people. I mean, how they experience these technologies. So it's, from my perspective, that's quite normal.
I see. Thank you.
A novelty effect. I see Aslı's comment. Gamze raising her hand.
Yes.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for this lovely presentation. It was interesting to see your reflections on it. I wanted to ask something about this one slide that you showed. I guess it was like a few slides back, and it was a quotation from you and Sharma's article in 2020, I guess, or 21, but probably 2020. And it stated that we need to have an empathetic approach. For students, it's more important how well they will remember this period of time. But now we are in 2022, and it's our new normal, and it's not something like an experience, it's the normal thing. And it's not emergent, it's the online education, necessary one. So what is your stance about it right now? Do you still but shall we still have an empathetic approach, or the focus of it change anymore?
Yeah. A few days ago, I just met with a short video. There was a student, probably he's attending primary school. He's living in the rural countryside, and he went up to the hill to get Wi-Fi connection and to participate to online exam. And there are many examples like that. And in some cases, we have personal problems, or we have emotional problems. So education is not something mechanical. I mean, it's not something linear. There is always rise and falls, and we have to consider from the perspective of the learners. I mean, not during the pandemic, but always. On the other hand, during the pandemic, we should be, I mean, maybe still, we should be more sensitive about being empathetic. And I remember this slide you are referring to, and we were telling that, maybe in 10 years' time, there will be movies about the pandemic and depicting these times. And probably these movies will focus on people's feeling. I mean, how they survived. And just consider yourself as an example. Just go back to 2 years ago. I mean, when the pandemic first hit the entire globe. Do you remember the computer you used? Do you remember the educational designs you encountered, or do you remember how you felt during these times? I mean, our argument was that in tough times, the empathetical approaches should be our only focus.
Thank you. So, sorry, as a follow-up question, of course, this approach is important. So shall we focus it on more than the content itself?
I think we should always be empathetic. I mean, content is not the only thing that educators deliver or something you get from the school. And now we are living in a time of networked online technologies, and content is everywhere. If we are psychologically good, if we feel not depressed, if we are not exposed to anxiety, we can access to content anytime, anywhere. So if you are asking that, if I understand you right, the content or technology, they should always be the secondary, not the primary objective. I understand you grasp what you meant correctly. If not, feel free to email me.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay, any other questions or comments, or shall we wrap up the session?
It's totally up to you.
Okay, thank you all for joining us for this session. And our next seminar will be on March 18th, next Friday, with Dr. Selçuk Doğan from Georgia Southern University. And we are looking forward to seeing you all there. Thank you all again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your kind invitation. See you around.
Thank you.